and welcome to Code to Cloud. And I'm your host, as always, Kevin Evans. And today we're going to talk about Azure Verified Modules, what they are, how they're going to help, how they're going to revolutionize how we deploy infrastructure in Azure. So, you know my style. I like to try and get the information from the horse's mouth. So, I brought two
Calling me a
experts in.
horse.
Well, you know, I like to try and get as close to the source of truth as possible. That's probably what I'm trying to say, Matt, right? But there you go. But yeah, so I'm on with Jack Tracey, and I've got Matt White. How's it going, gents?
Hey, good, thank you. Not too bad.
Good,
Yeah,
good,
nice.
good.
Thanks for having us on, Kevin. Nice
No
to be here.
worries. We have a bit of history, us three, right? These guys get lumbered with me. So, but yeah, do you just want to quickly introduce yourselves, what you do, the amazing work that you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Jack Tracey. I'm a senior cloud solution architect in our customer architecture and engineering team, which is part of our global customer success organization. Yes, that's a mouthful.
It is.
CAE in GCS is much shorter, but that's what we do. People will probably know me from things like Azure Landing Zones, especially the Bicep side of the house, Azure Verified Modules, subscription vending. That's the sort of area we're playing. But our team sits in this sort of interesting gap between we're not directly aligned to customers, but we get involved with strategics, but we also support the field when they need assistance with their customers, and between our product groups. So we plug the gaps of things that maybe need solutions developing to help you consume the products that the product teams are developing in a scalable way, just like Azure Landing Zones. Or we get involved in, hey, we need to develop new features and help product teams shape what they need to be, because we're hearing from the field what is required. So as I've mentioned a couple of times, Azure Landing Zones is one of those things that myself and Matt lead. And that's where we spend the majority of our time. However, we've just started on this new lovely project this year of Azure Verified Modules, but we're going to get into that in a second. So with that, I'll hand over to Matt.
Thanks very much. So yeah, my name's Matt White. I'm known as Matt FFF on LinkedIn and on GitHub. And yeah, you may know me from such GitHub projects as CAF Enterprise Scale, and also Azure Verified Modules. Also writing Terraform providers and stuff for Terraform vNext. So yeah, I've been shouting about that as much as I can on LinkedIn and stuff. But yeah, we're here today to talk about AVM. So we should probably do that.
Awesome.
Yeah. I mean, should we get into some slides? Let's do a little bit of slideware. And then we'll tease people with there are demos to follow, right? So stick around, like there is some good stuff coming. But let's give you the reasons and why have we done this. So hopefully we can all see that. So Azure Verified Modules, I think, as Kevin hyped up at the beginning, is trying to revolutionize infrastructure as code modules from Microsoft. But let's really step through that story of why we've created it. So we hear all the time that our customers generally start in ClickOps, right? Like they're doing through the portal, they're doing things manually. They might have the odd PowerShell script here and there, a bit of AZCLI, right? But they're very new to infrastructure as code, and maybe even haven't even uncovered it right now. And then as they mature in the cloud and they start doing lots more, they're like, hey, we should probably do some infrastructure as code and DevOps best practices, because that's how we scale, that's how we're going to do repeatability, how we're going to start testing things and all of that good stuff, which is hard to do when you're doing it for a portal, right? Because how do you test that somebody's going to click in the same way twice? It's pretty impossible. So customers go off and they start writing infrastructure as code modules, but they don't really talk. You'll find it'll happen in pockets, like an application team here will start and another application team over there will do a bit. And what that leads to is a proliferation of code, right? Lots of VNet, like you've got 15 VNet modules, 15 storage account modules, 16 VM modules. And somebody in IT then goes, well, hold on, we should probably try and bring this back together and decouple all of our lots of repeated lines of code and try and reduce that amount of code, right? Try and don't repeat ourselves, basically. And they quite rightly at that stage would go, maybe somebody has solved this problem already. Like let's go and have a little look out there and see if there's anything in like the open source world to see if we can take somebody else's good homework and use that instead of writing it again ourselves. So they go out there, they go to the wild, and they look on things like GitHub, and they find that there are many repositories with infrastructure as code modules, thousands we're talking around, all with their own standards, all with their own naming schemes, code styling, features that they say they deliver, their testing frameworks, all of that is there. And that really leaves our customers with a difficult decision. I have to randomly pick one or maybe two and put all their bets on it, right? Now, something we see quite a lot from customers who are new to infrastructure as code and maybe the open source world is they don't really read the support statements or licenses on the repos to start with to see what they're going to get hold of from the start, right? Like, who's going to support this if I have a problem? What's the long-term usability and like maintenance of this project? What's those things? So they start using these projects. And then unfortunately, and this is definitely the case for Microsoft, and I think it's important to note, something we were chatting with before we started, is anybody inside Microsoft who's a FTE, so a full-time employee, can create a GitHub or repo in the Azure or Microsoft organizations. And I absolutely love that about Microsoft. It's one of the best things that I think I've seen when I joined is innovation is just, fill your boots, like go and do stuff, go and do really cool things and innovate. But that does mean that people really who are consuming this have to really understand open source, because we're not doing anything incorrectly. That's exactly how open source works. But people need to read and understand that these things are run by open source contributors, and that doesn't mean that there has to be a support just because it's in the Azure organization or the Microsoft organization. Doesn't mean there's a fully backed support service because it's come from Azure or Microsoft. It's very much anybody can do those things. And that's exactly what's happened in the infrastructure as code space within Microsoft. We've seen various projects spun up by various people across the whole organization that are doing it for the right reasons at the beginning. And then they may change roles. They might leave Microsoft. Things may change. They might not have time to invest in that project they started once. And what that leads to is then customers like, well, hey, my support, I was raising GitHub issues and I was getting support, but now nobody's replying. Or I wanted some features added to these modules, but now nobody's listening or responding to my pull requests. Like, WTF, effectively, like what's going on? And that's a poor reflection on Microsoft, right? And that's not something we ever want. So what we have done, and what this was the problem that was given to me and Matt at the beginning of our financial year, so like 9 months ago. And we went, right, how do we solve this one? And what we came out with is Azure Verified Modules. So let's get into a little bit more about what Azure Verified Modules is. Matt, over to you, buddy.
Thanks very much. So as Jack said, we were faced with this problem of a kind of sprawling ecosystem of modules. And actually what we had is we had a number of these kind of projects running. If the Bicep side of the house, we had a thing called Carmel, which is the Common Azure Resource Module Library. And it's set out to solve some of the challenges that Jack has outlined. And on the Terraform side, we had something called Terraform Verified Modules. Now, this was a genesis of the Terraform product group, basically seeking to answer the same question. And so Jack and I were like, well, look, if we're going to do this, let's do this properly. And let's take what we've learned from Carmel and take what TFVM is trying to do. And let's push that together and try to make a kind of holistic experience for infrastructure as code on Azure. And ultimately, we're trying to address some of the key challenges that Jack has outlined, right? So we want as consistent as experience as possible for our customers. We want to adhere to things like the well-architected framework. So that when you deploy a storage account, the default replication pattern is ZRS. Or when you deploy an IP address, it's going to be in all three availability zones from the get-go. So we wanted to start off with a load of specifications. We spent a couple of months probably coming up with our base specifications as to actually what this looks like. What does a good infrastructure as code module look like? This comes from our combined experiences. And we brought in the Carmel team and then now part of the AVM core team. We brought in some members of the Terraform PG and also the Bicep PG as well. So it's a real kind of one Microsoft effort who's gone into creating this. So yeah, let's move on to the next slide and we can talk about this in a bit more detail about what this means. So this is a OneMicrosoft approach, as I said, to develop infrastructure as code modules with as similar kind of customer experience as possible, no matter what language. So to give you an example, we've got these things called interfaces. So in a lot of resources, we have features that are kind of the same. So private endpoints is one such feature. So what we've done is we've come up with a standard way of implementing private endpoints for any infrastructure as code module. We've got an interface for Bicep and we've got an interface for Terraform, and they look kind of similar. Of course, there are going to be differences because languages differ and we want to make the best use of every language. But nevertheless, they're kind of similar. And that gives you, the consumer of the modules, a better experience, because once you've learned how to use one AVM module, you can kind of use those same skills in another one, because if you know how to do private endpoints in Key Vault, you also know how to do private endpoints in, let's say, a storage account as well. So we have these standard interfaces which make the learning curve much more easy to consume. Another thing we've done is we've divided the modules into two categories. The first of which is resource modules. Now, these are modules that obviously deploy a resource, but they deploy a working resource. I think that's the best way of putting it. So if you think about a virtual machine, yeah, you could just wrap a virtual machine resource in a module, but you're also going to need an IP address, network interface, disk, that kind of thing. So the VM module contains all of these things because it needs to work, right? It's no point just sticking rigidly to our REST API spec. So if we then kind of build upon that, okay, so we've got resource modules, they deploy well-architected practices by default. That's really good. So, when I put my IP address, I get it in zones, and it's a standard SKU, not a basic SKU, and all the other good stuff. I think, well, actually, I want to put these together. I want to make the Lego bricks a bit bigger. So we then move on to pattern modules. So pattern modules can contain other pattern modules, or they can contain resource modules. And that enables you to build an application tier is a really good example, because you might have a VM scale set, you might have a load balancer, you might have public IP optionally, all of this stuff which you can build then a standard tier for your application. If you stick many of those together, you end up with an N-tier application. And then you finally combine that with like a SQL database resource module, and then you've got a end-to-end configuration. And if you really wanted, you could wrap that up into its own pattern module and give it to your customers and your departments to use. So yeah, that's the kind of thinking that we have behind this.
So
let's go for it.
Sorry, yeah. So kind of like a recipe. So I can see there we got pattern 1, pattern 2 as for example, AKS, right? And we've got AVD. Is LZA, is that landing zone?
Accelerator, yeah.
Accelerator. I was going to say architecture, landing zone accelerated, right? But yeah, so everything in there is, like you said, there's loads of moving parts, Matt, right? Like a virtual machine is a really good one to always pick on. I always use that as well, right? It's got disks, it's got an IP address, you need a network interface, right? You need a subnet to call on, all that good stuff, because if not, it won't run, right?
That's a good point, actually. The VM module doesn't do subnets deliberately, because otherwise you'd have one module that just did everything. So we've got the virtual network module, which also does child resources, so it'll also do subnets. So that's how we're thinking about it, if that makes sense.
The VM module will do the disks, the NICs, and all those things, right? It's a deployable single instance of that resource and any of its child resources. So like Key Vault's another good example. I'm sure we're going to see the Key Vault module in a sec, but it does the certificates and the keys and those bits as part of the Key Vault module, but it's not going to do the subnet to deploy it into with a private endpoint, right? Like it has the private endpoint support, but you need to do the subnet somewhere else.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense, right? Yeah, okay.
But they could absolutely be stitched. Like if somebody was like really passionate and wanted to stitch together a pattern of those things, you crack on, like absolutely fine. Like that's exactly what they're for. So we're seeing things like evolve into patterns, which is like our AKS landing zone accelerators or AVD landing zone accelerators, like using the Lego bricks of the resource modules. Like, think of them as individual Lego bricks. I now want a whole house, or I want a wall, or I want a roof, right? You can take those as pattern modules and stitch them together very quickly to get you the full architecture of what you're trying to develop. And that's the real benefit of them. But they build on top of the great stuff in the resource modules, like the common interfaces that Matt talked about, and well-architected framework alignment and all of those things. So you very quickly improve your quality bar, like you go from 0 to nothing very quickly with a very high quality bar.
That's cool. So, and I'm sorry to divulge.
No,
but
it's good.
So like the AKS accelerator, right? I've used that quite a lot over the years and generate Terraform code, Bicep code. Is that now under the umbrella of Azure Verified Modules, or is that
not yet? It's one that's being worked on.
Okay.
AKS is a really interesting one as well.
I know, right?
We've had lots of conversations with product groups and CXP teams about who own this module and what they want to do with it. The problem with AKS is it's so flexible and there's so many things you can do with it that creating one uber massive module is really hard to test and maintain. And that's what we've already seen with the existing one that the product group have written in TFVM. And they're like, we don't want to do that again because it's
too hard.
Too hard.
Painful.
It's really. Do you know what I was thinking? The other day, you almost want the same thing for app service, because you can deploy app service in about 17 different ways now, and it's like actually there's so many inputs. Maybe a simpler pattern would just be like, I just want the Linux container app version, or I just want this version or that version, the function app version. I think there's definite cause for that, because some of these resources are so complicated now, aren't they?
And I think that's Matt's alluded to, like the way we're going to there with AKS, right? It won't be one AKS module. It'll be cool. You want like a production, like private standard, like best practices module.
Scenario
based. We'll build a pattern for that. Yeah, scenario based, exactly. Really good. Like, when you go into the portal, right, and you click and you can choose like the drop downs of what, like, is this dev, is this prod, is this staging? Like, effectively replicating those things. Like VMSS does similar. Like, we want to replicate that sort of style. As various pattern modules. We talked about nesting them inside of one module so that you like provided like a single string that says I want the prod standard.
Yeah.
But that's a nightmare to then test and maintain.
No.
Like, so whilst doable and like something technically can be done, like it comes with trade-offs, and that's where we're being sensible. So yeah, some really good value here. So AVD is definitely one that's already sort of done, like that's pretty much there. Pattern modules are the place that we don't have a lot right now. But it's growing ever so fast, and like ALZ, all the work that Matt's doing on the next version of ALZ Terraform is all going to be built on pattern modules. So lots to see there. I think, like, very quickly, like, let's just get into this as well. Like, where does it fit, right? Where do our customers like use this thing? Like, we're mainly focusing on when you've got the platform established. So I've just mentioned that we're rewriting the next version of ALZ Terraform to use AVM because we were already starting that work, and it makes sense for us to now join those two stories up. But we're actually focusing on this more on the developers and application teams. Like, look, don't go and reinvent the wheel every time of writing your own modules to build a VM and some storage accounts and whatever, right? Like, use something from a registry off the shelf. And I think that's something we haven't mentioned. All of these modules are available in the public registries for either Bicep or Terraform. So you can just call them straight from the registry. You haven't got to clone any repos or do any of that stuff. Like, just direct them, and we'll show you how to do that when we get into our demos in a bit. But that doesn't mean you can't use them to do platform level tasks. And we are moving, like the Bicep. A question I always get is, ALZ Bicep, when's it going to be built off of AVM? We're going to do it, but we're going to do it as and when we need to do it and take new features on. And we're going to try and implement that in a non-breaking way, because we've got lots of customers already using the existing one. And we don't just want to turn around and go, right, new version, like you all have to upgrade, and there's going to be all these changes that you have to make to your code. So we're going to try and take it in pieces and slowly drip feed it in so that we replace it over time. Subscription vending is another good one. Like, we're currently moving the Bicep subscription vending module to be an AVM pattern module. That's in progress and should be here in a month or so. So we're doing that. But yeah, think about this as it can fit anywhere, but ideally it's targeted at our application teams to help them go faster, not our platform teams. And all of this isn't just in our heads and in lovely sessions like this. What we've done is put this all in a website that's on GitHub pages that we'll go to in a second. But if you head to the link of aka.ms/AVM, you'll find all of this, all of the specifications, all of the interfaces, like everything's documented, right? Everything is there. As including a nice 15-minute YouTube video that you can make somebody watch that sees me and Matt again.
Yeah, it's basically this.
Basically this, but less fun. So more formal. But it's good to share. If you're trying to get like the message of AVM across very quickly, you can go and make people hit that. And there is a lot of documentation, right? There is a ton of it in the AVM website. Something we're actually now thinking about of like, how do we make this easier to consume? Because there is quite a lot to go through. But this is a good flow to go through if you're new to AVM. Like, this is a good place to start. Like, look at what modules we've got available. Look at the classifications of modules. What do we mean by verified? Because that's quite an important question. What our support statement is, because I think, again, like, these modules are supported by us and by customer support in Microsoft. So you can raise an Azure support ticket against these and it will find its way to the module owners and they'll help resolve it. So like, we're trying to solve that problem if they're not supported. Like, we're not just glossing over that. Like, we're here for the long term on this. That's telemetry.
Yeah. Sorry, that's a really important thing, Jack, because I get asked that all the time, right? Is if I raise a support ticket via the Azure portal, will I get support on it, right? So
yeah. And the way that works is customer support will check it's not a platform issue, or check you like the template is valid, right? Like, it does what it does. If it's a problem within the module, they'll do their best to try and help you resolve it. But they may then go, we need to go and speak to the people who own that module, and we're going to get you to raise a GitHub issue, or we're going to raise one for you, and pass that to that team. And then we have an SLA which is documented on the site that says, within 3 to 5 business days, you should get a reasonable response, which says, we hear you, try this, or actually that's a known bug and we're working on it, and then we'll get it resolved. So it's not a commit to fix it within a certain time period, because we don't know what the problem will be. Nobody's that good. But we're definitely going to respond to you, and that's all automated. And we use a GitHub bot to harass people if they're not picking up, and we have a whole module orphaning process. So if people go quiet and they don't reply, like, we just take the module away from them, and then we take on the ownership. So like, we've really thought about the governance process in this as well.
I think it's worth pointing out that, especially in the Terraform world where you have all these different repositories, it is part of the setup process that the AVM core team has access as admin access. So we can never have a situation where someone creates something and then leaves and then nobody can get access to it and no one knows how it works or anything like that. So there's always a way in, which is, it's really important that we do that. It's because that we've fallen foul of some of this stuff in the past, and customers are using it still, and we've got no way of maintaining it on their behalf. So yeah, that's all covered by our setup.
Indeed. And I think like that leads on to like resources, right? All of this stuff's available. There's even some labs as well that I highly recommend if you want to go and get play with. Like, you can go and click on these links, and they're in the Microsoft Learn site. But like, you can effectively clone a repo and follow some steps through to do either Terraform or Bicep to do a very similar architecture in both, so you can get a feel for how each one works. But that's a really great way to get started on how to consume with them. And obviously we want to hear, so if you have any ideas, leave us feedback. Like, there's loads of places, GitHub issues, all that stuff. We really do listen. But yeah, that's effectively what AVM is. And here's the site we made earlier, right? It's all here. So if you go into the module indexes and we were to say Bicep, we can go into here and we can look at like what's going on. So you can see we've got 94 available resource modules today. We've got 18 still to migrate from Carmel, so we're really close to having that complete. We've got a couple that are orphaned, so we've migrated them. A lot of these are ones we've taken from Carmel to get them out, but the owner may not be here anymore, so we've instantly orphaned them, and they're available for adoption by new module owners. But people just have to say, yeah, I want to take one on, and off we go.
Maybe that's the next Christmas present. You know how you can get like adopt an elephant or adopt a thing? Yeah. You can adopt an AVM module.
Yeah, adopt an AVM module. I like that. Right?
That's it, Kevin. You're right. You look forward to Christmas. There's 14 here, so like your goal is to find more. Otherwise, you're getting all 14.
Sounds good to me.
But everything's here, right? And we have tests for all of these that we you can see if the tests are passing for these that run every day, and all that good stuff. And you can then click into the resource modules and look through the libraries, right? There's a CSV where all of this is the source of truth, and that's used for many things across our governance process. Much to Matt's dismay, he doesn't like the fact it's in a
CSV file. Honestly,
to feel dirty, Matt. Yeah,
it's easy to use for people who don't know how to use other things like our PMs who want to be able to update them with things like Excel. So it's a compromise. It's a compromise. But it works, right? And all of this data here is dynamically generated from that CSV. So, if you wanted to go and look at this module here for a container app, cool, you can click on it. It'll take you straight to the registry, and you're into the README of, hey, here's what it does. Here's some examples on how to use the thing, right? All very easy to rock and roll with and get going. All of the parameters are documented in extensive detail. All of this is automatically generated from the module itself, so it's always up to date. So yeah, some really, really good things in here. And we've got exactly the same that exists for Terraform as well. So if we go back and have a little look here, we go into Terraform, we got less on the Terraform side. Like I'll get that one out of the way straight away. There's tons in development. So these are all in development and very close. So we're getting there.
The reason for that is because Carmel already had basically a load of modules ready to go. So we're playing catch up, and with a bit of a skills issue as well. I think it's probably worth pointing out that if anyone watching is interested in becoming and helping out develop modules, whether that be Terraform or Bicep, we are absolutely open to that. It is not just a closed shop. The modules do have to be owned by a full-time employee because of the support stuff. But yeah, we've developed partnerships with several kind of non-Microsoft people now, and they help us write the modules basically. So yeah, definitely not a closed shop. Definitely want help. So yeah, if you're interested, shout.
Just for some background, right? Because I've worked with these guys before. If you were trying to figure out how do I improve my skills or how do I write good code, these guys will give you really honest feedback, right? So it's a good place to go and learn as well, right?
Experience.
Yeah. But it's again, it's a great learning opportunity as well, right? So.
And I think we've even automated a lot of me and Mattness into tests.
Oh yes.
Now, right? So, like
yeah,
a lot of this stuff happens automatically. We don't even have to review the PRs. Like it will check it for you when you try and check it in, and it will say yes or no and tell you what needs to be changed.
Yeah.
And there's still loads of work to do on that space, but we've got a lot covered already.
Yeah. So I've been learning how to write TF-Lint plugins basically, and so that's what I've been doing for the last few weeks, getting all that stuff in.
So if we just go into these standards, right? Because we're not trying to hide anything here. This isn't a black box, right? The shared specification is the rule book effectively of what a good AVM module should be and what it must comply with and what it shouldn't comply with. And that uses RFC 2119. There's a link to it here, which basically defines what must not, shall, should, all of those terms mean for absolute clarity, because it's always can be ambiguous. But then you get into all of these different things, right? So things that apply to both resource modules and pattern modules, things that apply only to resource modules, things that only apply to pattern modules. And these are cross-language, these requirements. We then have Bicep and Terraform specific rules that add on to these. So, more things around this particular use of that language and how to do things like that. In Terraform, there's lots of stuff around like how to do looping and stuff like that, because it can get fun in Terraform if you don't do it correctly. So, like the use of count and for each, there is one literally on here and tells you different examples of like, this is what good looks like, this is what bad looks like, very, very detailed on what to go into. And then I think the most important part and my favorite part of AVM is the interfaces, right? Providing the shim over the top, as Matt was talking around, for these consistent extension resources or child resources that every resource pretty much has, like diagnostic settings, role assignments, all of that stuff. But if any of you have been working with infrastructure as code for a little while with Azure, you'll notice that all of our individual resource provider APIs aren't always the same. Customer managed keys is my key offender in this space. Some of them want a resource ID of a managed identity. Some of them want the principal ID. Some of them want the application ID. Like, there's no consistency. But what we do in AVM is say, you provide us just this, right? This is all we're ever going to ask for in a module declaration from a customer. We'll worry about behind the scenes getting the right bit of data passed into the underlying RP API. You haven't got to worry about that. So instead of us going to all of our product groups and saying, you need to rename this in a new API version so that it's the same as everybody else and getting them to align, we're going to provide that skim over the top whilst we go and work on that with our product groups to make sure that they're doing some consistent things. But we're going to give the value to customers right now because we can do that because of these modules and the level that the shim that the interfaces provide. So lots of great stuff. I think, as Matt was saying, if you're interested in contributing, it's all documented here in the process overview. We've got some lovely mermaid diagrams, because everybody loves diagrams. So It's all listed out here on the process, various links to other places, and then we've got specific Bicep and Terraform contribution guidance as well. That's really extensive and is forever evolving. You can see from a lot of the pages right at the top when we update things, but these are often updated within weeks, so we're constantly evolving this page. And for those of you that are maybe more of a strategic or architecture level and advising teams on what to be using, this what, why, how page is probably the one for you, because it should go through all of those common questions of why would I even use something like this? Like, what's the benefit? And the final page, I would point you, or two final pages, FAQ. Loads of common questions answered in here. Like, there's probably a question that you've got that's in here. Definitely go and check this one out first. And then our resources page. So the presentation I was showing earlier, that's actually just this one here on the site. There's nothing to hide. You can go and get that. You can go and use it, do what you like with it. And then we're starting to list all the places that we're appearing. So we'll definitely be getting this one on here, and we've got a few others that we need to add to here. Matt's recently been on with a couple of other people in the community, so we need to get these added, as well as the links to the lab. So come here, come and check it out, and you'll also see blogs from us every month. We need to add the February one that went out earlier this week on the tech community site. So loads of great stuff going on here, but do go and check the site out because it should have everything you need.
Yeah, this will all be in the show notes as well, right, in the description. But labs, best way of learning, right? There's a lot of documentation there, but doing a lab, cut your teeth on this, right? So
they're really, really cool as well, right? So they literally learn code samples, and they literally say, right, these are the prereqs you need. This is what you need to go through. This is what you're going to do, and this is how you go and do it. Literally step by step, right? Like, it's all listed out. The same here for Bicep and Terraform. So really good way to go and cut your teeth on it, as you say.
Awesome sauce.
But yeah, hey, enough slides and websites, right? Like, who reads docs these days? Just you try it, right, and then complain when it doesn't work, and then bang your head against it, and then read the docs.
Exactly.
And go,
exactly.
That's what I should have done. So, should we get into some code? Should we get into how do these things work?
That would be amazing, right? It wouldn't be Microsoft if we didn't have a deck, right? So
true. Like, we have to use our own products, right? We have to use PowerPoint at least once.
But let's get an idea up, right?
Yeah, let's do it. I can't share, Jack. I think you might have to stop.
You have to stop sharing, Jack. Yeah, awesome. I love how Terraform and Bicep are joining forces. It's like Batman and Superman, right? Kind of thing.
So I'll give you an example here of the Key Vault module, right? So we've got you can see immediately that we've got the private endpoint here because it's Key Vault. We have to support private endpoint, and you can see that we've got that. In here. Where are we? Diagnostic. Oh, this is another interface, diagnostic settings. So just trying to remember what this looks like in terms of the questions that we're asking you when you fill out this input. And when we look at the Bicep version, you'll find that they are remarkably similar. And that's kind of part of the efforts that we're trying to make the experience similar. So give us a second. Go down here. This is a child resources. This is how we do child resources. So if you want to create some keys in the Key Vault, you could use the keys variable. It's a map of objects, as you'd expect for this kind of thing. Locks is another pretty simple interface, but we have the lock interface. Another thing probably worth pointing out is that because we're WAF aligned, I don't know if you know, but when you deploy a Key Vault, then actually it's wide open and anyone can get access to it from anywhere. Of course, there's authorization there, but there's no restrictions on who can talk to it in terms of IP addresses. So what we've done here is, and what we've done in other modules, is to say, nope, nobody can access it unless you tell us we can. So yes, it's public by default. We haven't defaulted to private endpoints because it's a bit of a stretch, but the default is an empty object here. So what that will do is fill out the defaults here. And so bypass is none, default action is deny, IP rules are all empty, and subnet IDs are all empty. So no one can actually access it, which is exactly what you want, and hopefully will prevent customers and consumers getting into a pickle when they deploy it, because they have to be explicit.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there as well on private endpoints, Matt, right? Like, some people might now be thinking, like, I thought you said it was WAF aligned, so why haven't you done private endpoints, right? We've taken the consideration, and again, this is in the FAQ, there's a whole section on what does WAF aligned really mean. first of all, we're not considering the cost pillar, because you can't have reliability, performance, and all the other great pillars that exist, as well as cost, right? There's always a trade-off.
Yeah.
So cost is not considered for this. We want you to do the right thing and do the most resilient, secure, and performant things. We can't help you do cost at the same time with that. We obviously have lots of other things like FinOps accelerators and stuff like that help you do the cost stuff, but they're not part of these modules. And that's a conscious decision. The other thing I think that's important to note is some resources, like the private endpoints, mean you need a DNS zone and you need a subnet and you need lots of other dependent resources to even make that deployment successful. So we don't want to bake that all into the resource module, as we were talking about earlier. We want to keep them as those like atomic Lego bricks, like very like this is a key vault and it's child resources. What we would rather you did is we've got the option that you can add the private endpoint in there, but you need to consciously turn it on. So its initial deployment would probably always work, right? Out of the box, default inputs would work. You can optionally then go and turn on the private endpoint when you go, do you know what, we actually want to make that one private endpoint. You haven't exposed it, as Matt's shown. It's always private, but you can then go and enhance its security even further by putting a private endpoint on it when you've got the required infrastructure ready for it.
Yeah, this is an example of the private endpoint. That's a really good point, Jack. It's an example of the private endpoint interface. And actually, it's got some interfaces buried in it. So the role assignments for the private endpoint is exactly the same as the role assignments interface for the main resource. We've just reused it. Same with the locks, if you want to put a lock on your private endpoint. Now, don't get me started about whether locks and Terraforms are a good idea, because Terraform knows about the lock and it will just delete the lock and then delete the resource, won't it? So anyway, but we've got it because Bicep's got it and we thought we'd better put it in. But yeah, the nice thing is, though, this is how you do private endpoints in every resource. And when we look at it in Bicep, it also looks pretty similar. There's really good documentation, which is automatically generated. So it takes this and then it sticks it in the markdown files in the README. Again, that's similar to Bicep as well. So yeah, it's a whistle-stop tour of the Key Vault module. I'm going to stop sharing now because I think we should get on to the Bicep one.
Cool. All right. Well, let me do that then. Window, that one. So very similar. All of our things are available in the public registry. So I've got a Bicep file here, and to get onto one, I can just type module as the keyword, give it a symbolic name. So let's just call this Code to Cloud demo, and then we're here. Now I've opened this up. Now all of our modules are in the public registry, so this is built into everybody's Bicep application by default and the extension. So you do BR public, and then boom, you get this IntelliSense list. And if you just type AVM, you'll see all of these modules are here. So like if we look for the Key Vault, for example, let me just go back and do Key Vault. Here we go, AVM Res Key Vault. We'll take that, thanks. And what versions, right? So all of them are semantically versioned. So we're never going to release a change back into an old version. So you can pin to a version with trust, and it's the same in Terraform as well. So cool, we use the latest version, and I can do equals required properties. Boom, right? I'm there. I've got to fill in some names, and give it a deployment name. Just getting on with that, and then I can do this, and boom, here's all of the stuff with all the documentation. So Matt was talking about private endpoints. If I look for that, boom, here it is, and we've now got IntelliSense support for the private endpoints as well. So using user-defined types, because before in Bicep, as soon as you went into a complex object or a complex array, you were left on your own basically to define how that looked. You had to read documentation to work that out, but we've used user-defined types. That now means when Jack selects the right thing, you get support all the way down. So it's an object, and inside that object, you need a subnet resource ID. And if I click here, I'll also see all of the other things as well. So control space is your friend in any in VS Code to get the menu to pop back up. And you can see all of these things are coming from that user-defined type definition in the module, so you know what's expected and where. So really, really powerful. Now, some cool things that have just come out in Bicep, and we've been working with the product group on this, is you can do F12 on a module, and what that does is it effectively gives you the JSON of the module, which we were like, well, that's sort of cool. I can see the underlying ARM template now, but I was using Bicep, so like thanks, but no thanks. I want to see the bicep. But if you see just up here, you've got this show bicep source thing that says experimental. So if you click on this now, you now get to see the underlying bicep of that module without having to leave and go and look at it in the GitHub repo. So pretty cool feature. You can copy this.
Does that reverse transpile it? Because
no.
I know in the okay.
No, it doesn't. And like that, they did think about this, but what we do now is we publish it with source. So in the container registry, this file actually is encoded in there. So when you pull down the module, this is hidden away in the extension somewhere in the background, but it's pulled down. So this is exactly as it looks like. So if I was to find that private endpoints, because you're like, hey, that was really cool. Like, how does that work? If we look in here and I find the user-defined type for it at some point, lots of user. It's at the bottom. I know it's at the bottom. So if you look down here, you'll see here is the user-defined type for private endpoints. So you can see how we've implemented it. So there's nothing hidden. Like you can go and look at exactly what's there. And again, it's built for you just to quickly be able to go, right, yeah, I've got my key vault. Right now, what do I want? Maybe I want a virtual network. So let's just say BR public, virtual network. Boom, I'll have one of those, thanks. That version equals right. I'm very quickly building this architecture without having to worry about what do I need for a VNet, what are the properties. This is here. I just go and consume, go. And it's great that they're all in the public registry because I now haven't got to have any files here. I just have the one that's calling the deployment and doing it. I haven't got to worry about keeping all of the source code for all of the underlying infrastructure as well.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Whistle stop tour.
No, I love the fact that you can just call on the modules and pull them down, right? And just reference them. Obviously, input your variables. I like the way that's documented out as well. We talk about this a lot about when folks are still trying to wrap their head around infrastructure as a code, and it's been out for a while now, right? But people are still struggling with it, right? Especially infrastructure folks that are becoming developers, right? Because everyone's a developer now, right? No, sorry to crash the party to folks out there that don't think that's going to happen, but it is. But it's how do I get started? How do I work through that flow, right? And using an AVM module, it's a trusted source. I think is the most important thing, right? Yeah,
that is the thing. Is you can rely on it. Microsoft are owning it. FTEs are owning the modules. Therefore, you can build that trust in them. Also, the comprehensive test frameworks that's been verified, and we work closely with the product groups on both sides. There's a lot of value you get from taking these. One question that I want to leave us with that I know people in the audience will have, and Matt will smile when I say this one, is why aren't we V1 yet? Right? Or why is it not got a GA label on it?
It's because that's a really good question. Let's tackle that one. It's because we have created all these interface specifications, but we have not tried them in hundreds of thousands of different situations. And it's not until that we know that they're good. We've already had feedback to say that some of the Terraform stuff needs changing because of Terraform, funkiness. And so we've changed it. So that would be a breaking change. So if we are V1, we then have to increment the major version. And, we don't want to be on V17 before Christmas. So we're taking it easy because we want people to try this stuff out. It is definitely ready for production use. But we don't know how people are going to use this stuff. So, yeah, we need feedback.
And it's just like Bicep and Terraform, right?
I was about to say, exactly
just like that.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So nothing stops anybody using Terraform or Bicep just because it's a 0. release, right? It's something we hear quite a lot from some customers. We just want to address that one right out of the bat. Like, it's good for production. Go use it. Give us your feedback. But we're like that so that we can say when we go V1, we know it's not going to change. We're pretty happy that we've addressed most scenarios that we won't need to change it that often. Yeah, and with that, I think that's us.
Yeah, Kubernetes is the same.
Yeah, exactly.
But we don't do big version numbers anymore, right? It's not the 90s. It's incremental now, right? So, But that was a fantastic demo. Some great slideware as well. It was engaging. I'll include all the links to all the resources in the show notes. Please go out and follow Jack and Matt, right, on, I was going to say Twitter then. I keep on saying Twitter. X. They're on LinkedIn as well. They've got the blog. Go and check out the ALZ stuff as well, because this goes hand in hand, right? So we won't go down that rabbit hole today, right? Because like,
not today.
No,
Matt's
not
got
today.
some really good stuff in the works coming up,
You
right?
got-
With the ALZ Terraform.
Yeah, there's loads of stuff coming on that. And actually, I've got to run because I'm just about to jump on the Terraform PG's community call, like in the next 2 minutes. And that's the reason that I've got to run, because I'm going to be talking about Terraform, ALZ Terraform V next. So yeah,
Right.
literally, that's where I'm going next.
Okay, right, we'll wrap this up. But thanks again, gents. And if you've liked the show, don't forget to like, share, and repeat. Catch you on the next one. Bye for now.
Thanks, Kevin. Cheers.
Bye.
Yeah.